Mr. CEO, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. Finally, first of all, have you settled down into your new role as the PSL CEO?
I'm getting there. I think I'd given myself, the first 3 months to settle in and get a handle on the business, understand the role players here in terms of staff and consultants and service providers, suppliers. It's a big business, 650 million rand business. So, I thought I'd give myself 3 months, and I'm happy with the way things are going.
Okay. Your immediate reaction when the chairman called you and said, "Stan, we want you to be the CEO of the league," what was your reaction?
Well, I had mixed feelings. I'd been very happy for 12 years, involved at SuperSport, both with the football club and on the broadcast side. So I wasn't really looking for change, actually, in my life. But I'd been part of the executive committee for 5 years. And, so obviously in that time, like to feel that we've made a small contribution in building the best league in Africa. So that when the opportunity kind of came from left field, after Zola left, I thought, I wouldn't want to go through my life thinking that such an opportunity to be at the helm of the number one league in Africa came my way, and I didn't take it. So I thought, why not give it a go?
Okay. And then what was your mandate?
Well, I'm the CEO, so I'm responsible basically for all aspects of league functioning, and still serve on the executive committee as CEO. So just a lot more responsibility.
Okay. Some of those responsibility will obviously look into the functioning of the league, but yesterday you also mentioned there might be a change possibly to the way the PSL calendar is structured, as opposed to from May to August to now January to December.
I think it's been a long ongoing point of discussion. There's various elements to such a thing. If we go back in history, coming out of the 1996 African Cup of Nations, there were a lot of South African players that were playing abroad. So we had guys like Benny McCarthy, Mark Fish, Eric Tinkler, Lucas Radebi, Phil Masinga, Quinton Fortune, and others that were playing in Europe, and so it started to become negative for the national team that we were running a calendar opposite to Europe. So part of that thinking in the first instance of changing the league, when we go back in history, as I've been taken through that, because it was before my time, but been taken through that process, was actually to support the national team and to ensure that the availability of players. So now FIFA, of course, has an international calendar, which helps greatly, because the release of players are streamlined and governed across the world in the same way. So that necessity is a little bit different now because of the FIFA calendar. Also, what we've started to find, just as a trend, is that our clubs haven't done well in the continental competitions. Now, we're not saying that the sole reason is because of the calendar, but it definitely does play a part in terms of the registration of players, the amount of players that are available to you. And even when I was at SuperSport, we participated in the Champions League a number of times, and also the Confederation Cup, and we definitely found as a club that we were hindered by losing out on one, sometimes two transfer window periods and not having enough players. I'll never forget our goalkeeper Grant Johnson having to play as an outfield player because we only had 13 players available for a key game. So those are the types of things that we've looked at to try and align with CAF. We do belong to CAF. But there's still some discussion to go in terms of the mechanics and how we change over from one season to another, either by extending a season or condensing a season, because there's a 6-month gap that needs to be factored in, and we've got the added complication of African Cup of Nations, on home soil next season. So we're approaching that in a responsible manner. We're not going to rush things. We had set as our target 2014. That was subsequent to AFCON and CAF changing their dates to odd years instead of even years. So we're still debating that. It needs to go in front of the Board of Governors. In principle, we've reached that decision, but the mechanics still need to be approved.
Okay. Now, when the league was cut down to 16 teams, concerns were around financial constraints, so to speak. But now, is there a possibility or is there discussion around to say, let's increase the league to either 18 or 20 to make sure that, you know, the country as a whole, you've got a population of about 45 million, so to speak, you spread it to other regions as well?
I think it's a complex discussion. It's not something that you can just take a snap decision on. First of all, it would be up to the Board of Governors to make such a resolution, whether they wanted to expand the league by 2 teams or 4 teams, as the case may be. We found when we reduced to 16 teams, which is kind of in accordance with FIFA's guidelines, and if you look around the world, you know, the amount of teams that are in leagues for a country of our size, that the leagues become much more competitive. I don't think there's any other league in the world that's been decided on the last day of the season for 4 years in a row. So that gives you an indication that the reduction from where we were at 18 teams to 16 teams has made the league more competitive, and yes, it's also meant that there's more financial revenue for fewer number of teams to divide, you know, in terms of the monthly grants, you know, and the disbursements of funds. So there's a competitive element in terms of the technical side of the game. There's financial elements that needs to be factored into, but also, you know, right now one of our biggest challenges in the areas where we're struggling is to get bums on seats. Now add another 2 or 4 teams into the equation, because the demographics of spreading or having a national spread of teams doesn't really, you can't engineer that in a free market system. Now we tried to do that when we had inland and coastal streams. We wanted to preserve the integrity of the country, so that there would be teams from areas like the Northern Cape or Eastern Cape and other such areas. And that was the thinking behind the inland and coastal, over and above cost containment. That was the thinking. But you find that, you know, the coastal teams have been strugglers over the years, whether you go from Hellenic, Bushbucks, African Wanderers, you know, the teams have struggled. Bay United from the coast, you know, to stay in the league, and that the inland teams start to dominate. And it's no different in other parts of the world. If you look at the English Premier League, London has a large majority of teams, and we have a large majority of Gauteng teams here. So it's impossible to try and preserve that national fabric, unfortunately, in that kind of free market system. But, you know, so to add an extra 2 or 4 teams, you know, you have to consider what value does it really bring, and you know, it will mean more players, maybe of a lesser standard. Yeah. So, you know, these things need to be rigorously debated and looked at. But for now, there's no plans to increase the number of teams in the league.
Okay, you mentioned bringing bumps on the seats, and primarily it's the responsibility of the clubs. But as the league, is there an initiative that you're taking to ensure that you help the clubs to make sure that there's you know, fair representation, so to speak, crowd attendance at the games?
We recognise that as a problem. You know, at the moment, if we're honest about it, you can look at Kaizer Chiefs, Orlando Pirates, Mamelodi Sundowns, maybe Bloemfontein Celtic, as having sufficient, if you know, for want of a better word, support in terms of crowds. And there are clubs that have done well. Ajax Cape Town have improved a lot. AmaZulu have improved a lot. You know, Golden Arrows have improved a lot. But you know, at the end of the day, the primary responsibility of promoting those games does rest with the clubs. We do have a part to play. We're not going to shirk our responsibilities. We're examining a lot of areas. We've brought in you know, additional resources into the marketing department in the league to focus exactly on that. But it all starts with understanding the market and having some market research. So we're in that phase right now. We've commissioned it. It started to understand from the consumer what is keeping fans away. You know, is it the simple dynamic of the ticket price? Yeah. Is it a transport issue? Is it a socio-economic driven situation? Because you can't divorce, you know, the macro factors around it. It's impossible for us to have a look only at football. If we look at the facts, and our research, you know, from a credible company like BMI indicates that year on year our football crowd attendance is up. whereas the other two of the big three sports in South Africa's year-on-year crowd attendance is down. So from that point of view, you know, we could also flip it and look on the positive side that in tough economic conditions, especially in the last 3 years with the global recession and so forth, we've still managed to grow. I think some of that had to do with the impact and positivity of the World Cup. That also needs to be unpacked. So we've commissioned strong market research countrywide to talk to the fans, to talk to the people and see you know, both fans who are attending and guys who are not attending, and say, why aren't you attending? How can we do better? The one thing we definitely have is a strong desire to improve and get better. So where we can add value to our clubs through any process, we will do that.
I think the coverage is fantastic on Super Disc. Maybe that's why they're watching. But anyway, the signing of the agreement with SAFU, any real significant benefits you see down the lines?
I think it was important for us to concretize that relationship. The talks have been going on for a long time, you know, with the players' union. There have been certain elements that we needed to wait for example, sufficient representation before we could engage. That process needed to be ironed out, and all the other mechanics of the collective bargaining agreement. We've done that in good faith and good spirit. The league's been making an annual contribution to the players' union, you know, since 2007. Or certainly since I've been on the executive, you know, of R1 million a year. So that's been showing our bona fides and our goodwill, that we have the interest of the players in mind, and that gives them capacity now to group together and you know, carve out certain industry benefits for themselves, whether it's from the medical side or the insurance side or other representative elements of how they can you know, set themselves up for life after football, and you know, other areas where now they can share with their members, with the support of the league. You know, they're part of us, you know, they're a partner with us in the process. That's important for us. And in accordance with global best practice. So I think in every area we always want to measure ourselves against global best practice, and the fact that we hadn't signed you know, formally, although we've been working together in good faith, was like an outstanding issue for us, and I was delighted that, you know, it could be brought to a head, you know, last week. So, you know, very happy.
All right. Salaries are always confidential matters, but you always hear rumors, reports that the players still earning 10,000 or less. That must be a concern.
Look, again, it's a free market system, and it's a dynamic that needs to be looked at really closely, because when you start talking about minimum wage, then, you know, other people are also talking about salary caps, and you have to be sensitive about the way you approach it. Leagues such as leagues in America and in certain dispensations in Europe as well have salary caps on players, and you know, and minimum wages at different levels. So it's something that we'll probably be exploring with the union as time goes by. Right now, it's a free market system. I think what you don't want is to hamper the game long term. So we need to be driven by what we see within the market now, with clubs and the league pushing very strong on youth development, on youth academies, on players coming through a youth system. You know, there needs to be grades of where you're at. You can't expect a young player who's probably been supported by his club for 4 to 6 years in schooling and transport, accommodation, every aspect of his life, coming through that youth system is not going to earn the same as an established pro or a national team player, you know, who's got a track record within the league. So those kind of things need to be balanced out. If you start pushing clubs into a corner and saying, you know, a number that's a minimum wage, you'll find that it could have the adverse effect of teams saying, you know what, we don't need to actually run with a squad of 30 or, you know, 35 players. Let's trim down to 24 players, and it might result in job losses. So you need to really be careful and tread carefully in that kind of area. It needs to be well researched and well understood from both points of view: the player, who obviously wants to maximize his earnings and where they deserve to earn big money, that they do in the league right now, and they should. but also clubs who need to, contain costs, because it's a global phenomenon at the moment of clubs going into administration.
Yeah.
And it's a big wake-up call for us as a league when a fantastic club with huge heritage and history like Rangers Football Club files for administration. We've seen clubs like Portsmouth and Nottingham Forest and Leeds, great icons at the top of the game in world football, struggling to make ends meet, and we can't think that we're going to be immune to that.
Yeah.
There's no question that financial pressure is going to filter down, and we need to be responsible about the way we balance things so that we don't create an artificial economy, and that we don't have a situation where to be in football is basically a prescription to make losses and cause financial ruin.
Okay.